It was blatantly obvious during the Chargers playoff loss how much they were missing offensively outside of Vlad McConkey, but could the Chargers make a big splash by going after A.J. Brown?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers, especially in the offseason, for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the Chargers made it to the playoffs, but unfortunately they were one and done. So every year, I think it's always important to go and take a look at what the successful playoff teams have been able to do to stay in the tournament for their chance at winning a Super Bowl championship. And one of the things is very clear. The Chargers need more help on the outside. A.J. Brown, anyone? That would be very, very exciting. Also, each one of these teams have a really, really good pass-catching tight end and really good running games to go with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of commonalities that we're going to talk about today, and it's always good just to see kind of where the Chargers can close the gap on some of the teams that are still playing this late into the postseason. But today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And David, as we get into our playoff lessons, one of the things that stood out to me just because of really what the box score has been for him the last couple of weeks is A.J. Brown not being a huge part of the Eagles offense even through their first 2 playoff wins. And there's a lot of salary cap and contract stuff that would go into making a trade for A.J. Brown that makes it very unrealistic, but there is a path that they could do it, and it wouldn't seem that crazy. But A.J. Brown is obviously a tier 1 elite wide receiver. The Chargers are missing that. They're missing a guy on the outside to pair with Vlad McConkey. And I think if you look at what this Charger team needs, you say, hey, if we could get somebody like A.J. Brown, which is obviously a huge if, spend on the interior of the offensive line and draft a tight end, now all of a sudden you're looking at an offense that maybe has covered up a lot of its warts, but he would have to make a mess, right? Why would he make a mess? They've won 2 games. They're in the NFC Championship game. I think part of the reason would be through 2 games that he only has 3 catches for 24 yards. Jalen Hurts, the only 5 incompletions that he had this weekend to make it to the NFC Championship game were all when he was targeting A.J. Brown. And earlier this season, Brandon Graham, who is his teammate and someone that's on injured reserve, basically said, hey, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown used to be friends, but something changed. He's already voiced his frustrations before, and we saw earlier this season that the Chargers don't mind necessarily going after a wide receiver, claiming or trying to claim Deontay Johnson after he had, wanted out of Jim Harbaugh's own brother's team and refused to go into a game. So they obviously believe in their culture. It might seem like a long shot, but David, maybe this is an out-of-the-box way the Chargers could find a wide receiver one or just really, really improve their offense that maybe not a lot of people are even considering.
I really like the idea of trying to go out and look and see if there's anybody anywhere to try to improve their ability to win one-on-one on the outside. And when you're looking at a guy like A.J. Brown, he has done it consistently throughout his career. He has been an absolute superstar, a guy that's repeatedly been able to get open, make big plays. 5 of his 6 seasons, 1,000+ receiving yards, 49 touchdowns, and big play guy, 15.8 yards per reception. So not only is he getting a bunch of catches, he's turning those catches into explosive plays. And also, not only has he been really good when he's been on the field, he's been able to be on the field a lot. Availability, he's played 90 of a possible 100 games in his career. So if you're going to pay a guy big money, or if you're going to bring a guy in and expend a lot of capital to be able to bring that guy in, you want to make sure that he's able to be on the field. That is not a problem for A.J. Brown.
Yeah, and you want to know that he's going to fit too, right? And I think when you look at 3,500 yards over the last 3 seasons, 25 touchdowns, obviously he's at the peak of his powers right now, and he feels like he's underutilized, which, like I said, he would have to make a mess there, but he would be a great fit with Vlad McConkey, and it would feel like all of a sudden he went from maybe having one of, if not the worst wide receiving cores entering last season, to feeling really good like you have a true kind of number 1 and at least a very high end number 2 in Ladd McConkey to build the rest of your offense around and what that opens up for you. But you're right. It's about what it would cost him. You're talking about someone playing at the height of their powers. It's going to cost a lot. Draft capital wise, and for the most part, salary cap wise, especially if you're going to try to make it work. So the first thing a lot of people would say is, hey, the Eagles would have to eat $50 million in dead cap over the next 2 years if they traded AJ Brown at, the end of the season after the Super Bowl, as soon as they could trade him, right? But there is a path around it. And at least according to Over the Cap, if they made a post June 1st trade for AJ Brown, which obviously the Eagles would probably want something back, probably a first round pick in this upcoming draft to make it happen. If that was the case, though, and they didn't want to restructure and mess around with the money to make it more workable on their end, a post-June 1st trade would only cost the Eagles $10 million in dead cap over the next 2 seasons instead of $50 over the next 2 seasons, and only $30 million over the course of 4 seasons between 2025 and 2028. But David, even though that part of it seems unlikely, if you could make it work, and it really is a messy situation, because obviously it's all good right now. If he gets, 2 catches and they lose in the NFC Championship game, on their way to a Super Bowl, he could want out. But then it's about, okay, well, are you willing to give up what it would take to go get him?
Yeah, that's the big question, because obviously AJ Brown's already been traded before, and that was a first round pick. This time, it's not going to be enough. And I think when you look at some trade comps that probably are around the ballpark of what it would take, especially in this unique circumstance, probably it's going to take a premium player plus a lot of picks. So in this situation, I look at the Tyreek Hill trade here, where it was a first round pick, a second round pick, 2 fourth round picks, and a 6th. That might be a lot, but we're talking about a superstar wide receiver in the prime of his career that has seemingly at least 4 to 5 really good seasons left in his NFL career, hopefully, as long as everything goes well. Like, this is the type of trade that it's going to take. And also, you look at the money, like the cap hits are 23, 22, 27, 29, which, honestly, I think looking at those cap numbers in consideration with what the rest of the high end is looking at the wide receiver position, that's not bad at all. These guys are making $35, $36 million per season. So that right there is definitely workable. It's about the compensation that it's going to take to be able to make a deal of this magnitude get across the finish line.
Yeah, and straight up, if it's a first round pick for AJ Brown, I would send it if I'm the Chargers.
Oh, yeah,
I
automatically.
think he's worth that on that contract, because you're not talking about a 1-year rental. Obviously, with star diva wide receivers, it's going to cost you eventually, and a trade a lot of times with these guys comes with a raise, and that's just what it is. At the same time, though, you're talking about mid-20s as far as cap hits, when the top receivers now are Justin Jefferson's making $35 million a season. Like, that is a huge deal. And you also have another receiver in Ladd McConkey, who during this window where you're going to have fat cap hits going to AJ Brown, you're going to have a guy in Ladd McConkey who's making borderline nothing compared to what the top guys at his position are making. So that would be the argument for it. I think the bigger thing is, okay, would the Chargers actually spend for, what it would cost on a yearly basis to bring in a number 1 receiver like that? Same argument for a T. Higgins or anyone else they might add that's at that level. I don't know. That's what we have yet to see. Jim Harbaugh, historically, do they want to pay receivers like that? Probably not. But I think the point of this is, though, David, it's, hey, whatever way you have to bring in more talent to this offense, maybe thinking outside the box, maybe it's a Tyreek Hill trade, which we'll get to at some point. But you need that guy. You need another offensive playmaker of that level, or, something close to that.
Ladd McConkey is an absolute superstar. A fantastic rookie wide receiver, a guy that really, truly broke out. But he wasn't enough, not on his own. So you have to go out there and add more talent, more impact on the outside. Pair those two things together, and I think you're going to see some great results.
Yeah, and like I said, AJ Brown might seem unrealistic. There is a path for it to happen, and it would just be how much the Chargers would be willing to give up for him. And maybe you have enough later draft picks and stuff like that to still move around the draft and get the impact players that you want later on, especially if you're moving a first round pick. But either way, it's just about, hey, you need more. You're not just going to be able to fill it all in free agency. You're not going to be able to just fill it all in the draft. It's going to have to be maybe some, outside of the box, unconventional thinking if you want to kind of close the gap to where these good offenses are, because that's another playoff lesson. So a lot of these offenses had to put up some real points to get to this point in the season and in these games over the weekend. But we still have more to get into as far as the playoff lessons, because one thing that really every team left in the playoffs has is really good options at receiving tight ends. And that's something the Chargers, as we saw with Will Dissly, do not have right now. So we're going to talk about the importance of that and the importance of not turning the ball over and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire, and let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights, and that's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I know I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself. I think everyone should if they're not, because everyone I know uses LinkedIn. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is crucial, and LinkedIn gets that, and that's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn has helped them find a high-quality candidate. And that is the important thing, because you don't want to have to be filling the same job a couple months later because you got someone that's not the right fit. The right fit is important, which is why you need all of the data available to you with LinkedIn. So you can hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also need to tell you guys about Prize Picks, because it's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action while we have them, and that's where Prize Picks comes in, because if you love football and want a chance to win real money watching these games, Prize Picks is the place for you, and it's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, and you can make picks in less than 60 seconds. Whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. I've gotten paid in 15 minutes with Prize Picks, and you can still get in on the action tonight with the college football playoff championship game. Prize Picks can start you off with something you're not going to find elsewhere. Will Howard throwing for more than half a passing yard. That's the one that Prize Picks is going to give you for this one, which means you only need one to be in the money. And you could go with Jeremiah Smith going for more than or less than 80.5 receiving yards. You do that and hit those, you win. So right now they have a special offer for our listeners. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. You don't even need to win. Prize Picks, run your game. David, when you're looking for the commonalities and what these teams have that are still in the playoffs, I mean, there's a lot that you could look at, and we'll talk about a lot of them today. And I think when you find these ones that are so consistent, right, and then you look at the Chargers who just clearly don't have it, it shows you, hey, there is something, and there's room for the Chargers to gain there. And also, it makes it very easy to realize what the Chargers need to do. And I'd say one of those positions is pass catching tight ends, David, because if you look at the groups that are still left in this playoffs, you're not going to find a single one that doesn't have good options at that position.
That's 100% correct. I mean, you look at the Bills, they have Dalton Kincaid, a guy that we really liked a lot when he was coming out of the draft, and he had a great year, 73 receptions, 673 yards. Obviously, you look at the Chiefs, and you have the Hall of Famer Travis Kelce, who pretty much is their tight end and also wide receiver one. I mean, 97
he single-handedly was their offense this week.
Yeah,
it was crazy,
just unreal. 97, almost 100 catches for a tight end, 823 yards. Obviously, the Ravens had a couple of good tight ends with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, and the Commanders had Zach Ertz, who 65 catches, 654 yards, 7 touchdowns. So just one of the things you see, all of these teams that are still in the tournament have really good pass catching tight ends, really good guys that can get open, be friendly to their quarterbacks, and move the chains. And hey, Will Dissly did a great job in his first season as a real actual kind of pass catching tight end that Justin Herbert really turned him into. But let's not kid ourselves and say that Will Dissly is the future of the pass catching tight end part of this offense, because he's not. The Chargers need a lot more from that position, and it just goes to show you, you look at all these teams that are still in it, they have guys that are dynamic, making plays at the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce was the Chiefs' offense, 7 for 117 and one touchdown.
Went crazy.
Patrick Mahomes only had 177 passing yards, and 117 of them went to Travis Kelce. Dallas Goedert is leading the Eagles in receiving yards through 2 games as well. tight ends are important. I mean, you look at even the guys that got eliminated from the playoffs, right? The Lions have a Sam Laporta, like you said, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and even the combination of a Dalton, a Dawson Knox, and a Dalton Kincaid, like that's just so much better than what the Chargers have, as far as their tight end room goes, specifically as pass catchers. Yes, I would love to see more of Stone Smart. Hopefully they as a restricted free agent will back and you can see what you have in him, but you can't really just have a ton of faith that that's going to close the gap between where you are right now and the pass catching tight ends that you're seeing that are left in the playoffs, which is why, probably later this week we'll discuss, why the hottest topic so far in the draft regarding the Chargers is them potentially getting a tight end in the first round, whether that's a Tyler Warren, whether that's a Colston Loveland. We'll talk about those guys a little bit later as we kind of start getting into, hey, let's take a look at this draft and see where the Chargers could go at 22. But Will Dissly made it very apparent kind of what the gap is between where they are and where these other teams are. And it just feels like, when you're looking at like an A.J. Brown, yeah, that might not be realistic. You might not be able to get a receiver of A.J. Brown's caliber, but having a great pass catching tight end is a great equalizer as well. And yes, you want to be able to pass, but there's some other guys too in this draft class that aren't going to just help you out as pass catching tight ends, even though they're much more legitimate than what you have right now and have higher upside, but they also can help in the running game too. So another reason why, hey, a tight end can help you in multiple facets, and there's no coincidence that these are the tight ends that are still there in the playoffs, and all of them are making big plays for these teams. But another big kind of trend, David, this weekend was the teams that turned the ball over a lot lost. And of course, that seems like a super obvious thing, but I think you'd be surprised kind of how dramatic the margins are there. And of course, when you look at how the Chargers lost, that was one of the most frustrating things, was they did such a good job of taking care of the football all season just to have it all blow up for a Justin Herbert 4-interception game. But you saw it this weekend exactly how costly it is when you don't take care of the ball.
Hey, the margin for error in the playoffs is so minimal. And if you turn the ball over, chances are you're going to lose. The Lions turned the ball over 5 times in their loss to the Commanders. The Commanders turned it over 0 times, and they won by 14 points. The Rams turned the ball over twice. The Eagles did not turn the ball over at all. The Eagles won the game. The Ravens turned the ball over 3 times, and they lost to the Bills. This is not a coincidence. This is an obvious trend. This is exactly what happens in the playoffs. All of the good teams, whether you have fantastic offensive output performances or not, if you take care of the ball and you do what you're supposed to do, then you are going to give yourself a great chance to pick up a playoff victory.
And we'll talk about this more with, just how important the running games have been for these playoff teams. But you look at 3 of the quarterbacks who won their games this weekend. Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen had less than 128 passing yards between, each of them. Neither one of them eclipsed 128 passing yards. Patrick Mahomes had 177. But none of those teams turned the ball over at all. It's crazy. If you look, literally the 4 winning teams, not a single giveaway between them. And you look at the 4 teams that lost, the Texans didn't give the ball over away at all, which is even more confusing how they lost by as much as they did.
Yeah.
The other teams, 11 giveaways to 0. That's what the difference was all weekend. The teams, even the better teams, lost because they turned the ball over. So I think one of the things for the Chargers is, hey, with what you were able to do in the regular season, it doesn't matter when the playoffs start, but it shows you what you're capable of, right? You're a team that is capable of taking care of the football, but it also, I think, has to just do with how overmatched they are. Because, I mean, if you're that overmatched and you start trying to do too much, you're probably going to make some dumb plays. And, I mean, that's why I don't put the last, turnover on Justin Herbert, that last interception when you're down 32-12 or whatever it is. Because at that point, you're just trying to see what you can get going. But the problem is you were so overmatched that you're at a point in the fourth quarter where he's hucking it down the field and getting his 4th interception. So Justin Herbert, as you saw in that game and as you saw this weekend, playing like that and having those disaster plays, even if you're an elite quarterback, even if you're the best of the best and did a great job the entire regular season, in these games, it's just so much more important. And it's the difference between wins and losses. And that's one thing. Hey, if I had to put my money on it, I'd say Justin Herbert's going to take care of the football much better in his next playoff game. But it didn't matter this year. And we saw how important it was. And many other teams learned that lesson, just like the Chargers did in the first weekend this weekend. But we still have more playoff games to get into and lessons to get into for sure, because another thing that really shined through this weekend, running games matter. And the Chargers wanted to have a running game for a reason, and we saw it because all the teams that were playing in this part of the playoffs, pretty much except for the Chiefs, have really good running games, and the really good running backs that they have really matters as well. So we're talking about all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel, because from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's right, $300 to keep the action going. We had $250 a couple weeks ago, $200. We're talking about $300 in bonus bets, and the FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game super exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. And I know right now the Chargers aren't in it, but there's one team that we can root for, and that is the Buffalo Bills, who next weekend, the lines are already out on FanDuel. The Bills are 1.5-point underdogs against the Chiefs. But I like that line. I think the Bills can absolutely get it done. I would be going money line if I was in a FanDuel state for sure, because I think the Bills this weekend can get it done for sure. All you have to do if you guys want to get in on the action, visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you can get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. David, we have some more playoff lessons that the Chargers need to learn from today, and I hope you guys are having fun just kind of listening along, and following along with the playoffs, even though the Chargers aren't in it, because I think, we had some really, really good games over the weekend and should have some more good games this upcoming weekend. But thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where they have 2 shows a day covering the entire league. And the best part is they're bringing on people who cover their teams every single day and are that LinkedIn just like we are on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. David, running backs matter. Running games matter. I think there was a while where the league was kind of super pass happy, and you saw these teams just lighting up scoreboards, and there's still teams like that. But I think what you're seeing at this point in the season, with the weather where these games are happening at, you got to be able to do both, and you got to be able to have a good running game. And you look at the constants, right? The common denominators of what these winning teams have and what the Chargers are trying to build. You see why they're doing it, right? Like Saquon Barkley is single-handedly getting the Eagles playoff wins, 2 of them already in 2 games. 6 of the 8 teams that played this weekend had 147 or more rushing yards. 7 of the 8 teams had 111 rushing yards or more. All of these teams can run the football, and even in these weeks where, the quarterbacks aren't doing much, the running games are helping these playoff teams win games. I thought this weekend was one of the most glaring kind of showcases of, hey, running games matter. December football, January football, wintertime football, playoff football, you got to be able to do it.
You absolutely do. And you remember how many rushing yards the Chargers had? 50 rushing yards in that game against the Texans. They could not get anything going whatsoever. No matter who they gave the ball to, it was a struggle. And so the running game's very, very important. These winning teams, these teams that made it to the next level, they have guys that can go and run the football, and they're staying committed to the running game. Like, even though the Ravens lost, that first drive out in the second half, basically when they got the ball back after they got that first stop, they ran it straight down the field and punched it into the end zone, and they stayed committed to that running game. Saquon, you mentioned it, 26 for 205 and 2 touchdowns. Just an unbelievable performance. The Commanders, 177 yards rushing. The Ravens and the Bills both had over 145 yards rushing. So those are teams that are consistently making it to the next level, deep into the playoffs. You have to be able to run the ball. It makes your play action game that much more effective. That's what we've talked about all year long, which is a part of why Justin Herbert had some trouble with that avenue, obviously with, other aspects like the interior of the offensive line, which we're going to talk about in a second. But the running games, they travel all throughout the season and especially in the playoffs. You got to have a good one if you want to be able to win.
Yeah, and even the Bills, right? Going up against a team like the Ravens, who I believe in the number 1 ranked run defense in the NFL this year, only giving up 3.8 yards per carry. But yet, they still found a way to get it done. They still ran for over 147 yards in that game. And the Ravens, even in a loss, if they had kept it close or even had the lead, they probably would have went for well over, 200, 250 rushing yards had it been like that. But either way, they can all do it. The only team it doesn't matter for is the total outlier, and that's just the Chiefs. And you just can't use that as the construct of what builds your championship team, right? Because it's not sustainable unless you have a Hall of Fame tight end and a Hall of Fame coach and a Hall of Fame quarterback. 7 of the other 8 had 111. 6 of 8 had 147 rushing yards.
Yeah.
The Chargers had 147 rushing yards 4 times all season. You just saw 6 teams in one weekend of the playoffs have that in a game. It's so important. And I think also just the running backs and running the football, or the quarterbacks running the football as well, and how important that is when you're looking at, even with Lamar, 2 turnovers, with him running and him being able to escape, and Josh Allen's ability near the goal line to get in the end zone, or Jaden Daniels' ability to go pick up key first downs. And you can throw Patrick Mahomes in there as well.
Yeah.
All these guys can do that. And Justin Herbert, when the Chargers running game did struggle, didn't have a single carry in that game, which I thought was just ridiculous as well. On him, on the coaching staff, on everyone. But you need to have it. And that's why all offseason they said, what if we give Justin Herbert a running game? Because they know how important it is. They just have to actually do it this time. And I think to do it, where it starts is not just at running back. And the reason we bring this up is because the Chargers' best running back is headed into unrestricted free agency. But it has to come from the offensive line and winning in the trenches too. And that's another thing you're going to see here, David. 4 teams left and 4 interior offensive lines that are playing much, much better than what the Chargers had.
And just have more talent than the Chargers have. I mean, you look at the Eagles. Yeah. The Eagles' offensive line is disgusting. Like, just going down the line from left tackle to left guard to center to right tackle, they're all fantastic. I mean, and especially the interior of the line. Dickerson, 79.4 run overall grade from PFF. Their center, Jurgens, 67.2. Mekhi Becton, one of their guards, 72.6. The Chiefs, they have Creed Humphrey, who's one of the best centers in all of football. They also have Trey Smith, who's going to be a guy who's going to be a hot name in free agency that I know a lot of Charger fans are definitely keeping their eye on there. The Bills have McGovern, their center, who has a 70 overall grade. The Commanders have Biadasz, who has a 67.1, and Cosme, who has a 67.8. All of these grades are better than what the Chargers grades are on the interior. Need I remind you, it's Zion Johnson with the 64, Bradley Bozeman with the 61, and Jamari Sawyer with a 54.3. That's not going to get it done in the playoffs. It just goes to show you how important it is to have such a strong interior of the offensive line, because not only does it protect your quarterback, it opens up those running lanes for your running backs, which is something that you really need to have as well. So it's the strength of the offensive line and the running backs together if you want to win.
Yeah, and I mean, it just has to be more than just having the tackles. Obviously, the Chargers had their tackles, and that's set up for the foreseeable future. Hopefully, with the Rashawn Slater extension, we're not even talking about that for a long time. But they were desperately missing what they needed in the middle to have success, which is why, even though you have guys like Zion Johnson and Trey Pipkins and Jamari Sawyer coming back under contract, it has to be different. There has to be change there. You can't just wait for these guys to develop. You have to find more talent there. Maybe they do throw, a huge blank check at a Trey Smith and try to take away from a division rival. He'll be probably the top guard out there in the offseason, depending on what you value. But all these teams, like 3 of them have dominant interior offensive lines. The Bills, right? The Chiefs obviously have the best trio in the league. The Eagles would be probably right after that or close to it on the interior. And even the Commanders, right? Not household names, right? Tyler Biadasz was a free agent acquisition that they got this year. They poured money into the center position. They went and got Tyler Allegretti to play guard for them. That's 2 of their 3 interior guys they went and signed this last offseason to protect Jaden Daniels. And he has done a lot in helping that offensive line out. Sure. He's an athletic freak, and he's, a budding superstar, frankly, from what he's been able to do in this playoff run. But they went and invested and got the right parts, right? Because outside of Taylor McLaurin, like, there's not a ton of, receivers there that are huge household names. You got guys like De'Ami Brown, who would probably still be the Chargers wide receiver too this year, especially in that last game, he would have definitely. But they also, have and spent that money on the interior to shore it up there because they knew how important it was. It has really helped their running game as well. They've had one of the better running games in the NFL this year, especially with Jaden Daniels. But guys like Austin Eckler making big contributions and Brian Robinson Jr. So there's a lot of commonalities, right? These running backs that are making huge contributions in these games, the Brian Robinsons, obviously. Then you have the James Cooks. We talked about Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley doing it by himself, basically. Another big important thing about having a great interior offensive line is because the freaking defensive lines you're facing in the playoffs are absolute monsters. I mean, we're talking about guys like Ed Oliver and Chris Jones and Jalen Carter, all in the interior, all guys who would absolutely wreck shop inside the Chargers interior if they were still playing. Still out there. Like, you need something to combat these guys, even the losing teams, right? The Ravens have Justin Madubuike. The Lions, right, when they're healthy, they have Elaine McNeil, who's awesome inside, and also Aiden Hutchinson on their line. But the Rams totally rebuilt their defense post Aaron Donald, and they still had 6+ sacks in both their playoff games. Having that defensive line is important.
Jared Verse is a dude.
Not only do the Chargers need great interior, but I think they could also learn, hey, if you could build a crazy defensive front, right, not just the pass rushers on the edge, but on the interior as well, you're seeing how it can wreck games in the playoffs. It absolutely is. And that is the easiest and hardest thing easiest way to get to a quarterback. And one of the harder things for a quarterback to overcome is that pressure that comes right up the middle. So the teams that struggle on the interior, stunts and twists, all those things, they're not really in the playoffs anymore, right? And the teams that have the monster defensive lines and the monster interior lines in January are the teams that are winning and advancing to the championship game this upcoming weekend. So the Chargers have a lot of ground to make up, and it'll be very interesting to see what other things we can kind of take away from this. Maybe the Chargers look for a different trade. Maybe it's someone that might be in the spotlight right now for not the right reasons. Maybe a Mark Andrews on a buy or sell show tomorrow. But make sure you guys are back here for that. If you guys want to give us your buy or sells for Buy or Sell Tuesday, hit us up at Locked On LAC, or you can hit us up on Instagram at Locked On Chargers or Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You're also going to want to make sure you never miss the show by following or subscribing for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also wherever you get your podcast from, because we also have a big interview coming up this week. One of the most polarizing names in Chargers beat writing history, Daniel Popper, is scheduled to come on the show this week. Cannot wait to pick his brain after the first year of Jim Harbaugh for all the good and the bad that we saw. So make sure you guys are subscribing and following for free and hitting us up at 323-524-7924 if you want to leave a 30-second Chargers buy or sell tomorrow, or hit us up for the next fan mail show. You guys can get in touch with us there. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for Chargers buy or sell. Could have Mark Andrews be in play? We have a lot to get into. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.